Hello, everyone. This is your host with the most adjacent, everyone's favorite German chocolate, me, JT. And I am the LGBTQIA plus regional engagement coordinator of the South here at PrideNet. I come to welcome you to a beautiful Tiym Talk event entitled Words to My Younger Self, a two-part live stream forum that seeks to explore and provide best practices, strategies, resources, and storytelling to improve programs, services, and initiatives that address the impact of HIV on youth and young adults. It's a time to be aware. It's a time to be informed. It's a time to listen. In the meantime, enjoy these two videos to learn more about what we're doing at PrideNet with the All of Us research program and the Pride study. Then Richard, our wonderful moderator, is going to take it away, and you're going to hear from some very dynamic panelists as they share their experiences. Have a great day and enjoy.
Are we good with the sound? Okay.
I'm a Russian-speaking, gay Catholic,
Chinese, Mexican,
Latina,
White male,
biracial,
bisexual,
trans woman,
lesbian.
Colombian American.
I kept trying to come out to my parents, but they really don't understand.
I mean, I like being a lesbian.
I don't wish I was straight at all. I think that this makes me special.
And especially in this time and age, being gay is seen as an asset.
You know, the person who really is most accepting of my transgender identity is my mom.
She came at me with a knife and screaming that she would rather see me dead than living the life that I was living.
I knew that there were aspects of who I was and how I was in the world that were not welcomed in the medical world.
When I visit a new doctor, it's always a challenge.
I had colon cancer about 10 years ago.
One of the first things I feel like I have to do is kind of dispense with this notion that I'm straight.
So what are you using for birth control? And I said, nothing.
You don't want to go into a clinic and then end up having to educate your own doctor.
And she just stopped and she looked at me like I'm an idiot.
That's what they're there for. They should already know.
You know, going to the doctor should be a safe place.
I try to avoid situations where I feel like I'm going to be stigmatized or discriminated against, but I know that that is something that I can't always control.
Our community has gone through an enormous number of hard things over many, many years.
You know, thing after thing hits us, and we always come back.
I mean, really the community provides, in many ways, everything.
We really need to join together as the diverse and dynamic communities that we are and help to transform the health system together.
I always feel that if my struggles can help someone else not have to go through the same thing I went through, then it hasn't all been in vain.
The All of Us research program is an ambitious effort to gather health information from 1 million or more people across the U.S. Researchers will be able to use this information to uncover new, more precise ways to prevent and treat disease and to keep people healthy.
When I came out, I didn't feel comfortable, I didn't feel safe, you know, and that was a very hard place to be.
Coming out as lesbian, gay, bisexual, even now transgender, it was hard to do that. And so because of that, you know, whenever you went in to see a doctor, you were too afraid to really actually say who you are.
The biggest obstacle, to be honest with you, and simply is this trust, right? Trust from the community on not being misgendered, not being mistreated.
The health community, healthcare, they didn't get that. At that time, they felt like everything is one fit. That no matter what happens to one community, it's going to happen exactly the same thing to the other community. And that's not the case.
The lack of data has been a major problem for a number of years. It's really only been in the last 10 years or so that the big health systems, the surveys that go out to people nationwide, have included any questions about sexual orientation, and only a handful of them have any questions about gender identity.
Oftentimes what happens, particularly within communities that don't feel safe within a medical field, is they'll prolong and they'll wait and they'll say, it'll get better, and then by the time they go to the doctor, it's so late.
My family has had issues like high blood pressure, diabetes, so I'm very mindful of that and really trying to do everything I can to resist that.
One of the things for me that I have to be careful of is, my heart. My mom died at a very at a very young age, at the age of 43, of a heart attack.
What I really appreciate about all of us is really taking this approach to make it inclusive of as many people as we can.
We'll have the information from 1 million people, people of color, LGBT people, people from diverse communities, to tell us about themselves.
To get their biological information into the database so that there's more information to work with when trying to develop new ways of treating people and treating those disease processes.
That's the only way we'll be able to find out and understand whatever that we need to do to take care of ourselves.
That's a call to be honest and open about being LGBT. It's really a much broader call to stand up and be counted. All of us being seen will give us hope.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to #NYHAAD Tiym Talk, words to my younger self. So today will be a live discussion and celebration and commemoration of National Youth HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. I'm your host, Richard Hutchinson, co-founder and executive director of He Is Valuable Incorporated. And today in this space, I have the honor of serving as the Director of Community Engagement for Tiym Network. Tiym Network is a collective of people living with HIV and impacted by HIV, dedicated to educating, empowering, and entertaining the HIV community. Our mission is to blend HIV-related information, research, and advocacy with the contemporary culture through creative approaches to increase awareness, fight stigma, and improve health outcomes for people living with HIV and impacted by HIV. We are thrilled to bring you this amazing two-part program today, along with our powerful and amazing both subject matter experts, colleagues, and who we love to call friends. As a Black, queer, young person living with HIV myself, I know firsthand the impact of HIV on our communities, particularly young people. And that's why events like this are so important on days like National Youth HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. Today, we're going to be speaking with some amazing individuals who are doing important work in the HIV field. And we're going to be learning about the key issues facing young people living with and impacted by HIV. National Youth HIV Awareness Day is important for many reasons, and we will highlight them today. So today, we empower everyone to sit back, listen, enjoy, and be educated. Remember, today is a time to be aware, a time to be informed, and a time to listen. So let's set the tone. Why are we here today? Why are we talking about the impact of HIV on youth and young adults? Young people aged 13 to 34 account for more than 1/4 of all new HIV diagnoses in the United States. In 2021, young people aged 13 to 24 accounted for 19%. That's 1 in 5 new HIV diagnoses. And that Black and Latinx young people are disproportionately impacted by HIV. In 2020 alone, Black youth ages 13 to 24 had the highest rate of new HIV diagnosis for young people across all races. These statistics are clear indication that there is still need for a lot more work to be done to ensure that young people, people of color, and those most impacted by HIV have access to information, resources, and support that they need to stay healthy and prevent the spread of HIV. So today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into some key messages, issues, and questions around HIV prevention and treatment, research, and advocacy. We're going to be exploring some of the key questions that young people have around HIV. And at the end of the show, we'll be bringing everyone together to have a live Q&A panel discussion. Again, young people living with HIV are less and least likely of any age group to be retained in care and have a suppressed viral load. Addressing the impact of HIV on young people requires that we have access to affirming, culturally competent, and medically accurate resources and tools. The meaningful involvement of youth and young adults is pivotal to the goal of ending the HIV epidemic in the United States. Thank you all for joining us again. I want to apologize ahead of time for the lag that you may be hearing or the sound. We may be having some sound and audio issues. So I thank you all for patience and joining us today for this amazing event. We're going to start off with our first guest, Alfonso Mills, someone who I call Kindred.
Yes. Hello, Kindred. Are we live? I think my video might have paused. Okay, so I think we're having a little. Oh, perfect. Well, I'm happy to be here. Oh, so I apologize. I can't hear Richard, so I don't want to talk over you, Kindred. So maybe while we get Richard's audio set up, I would love to give some greetings. First off, happy National Youth HIV/AIDS and Awareness Day to you all. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for taking some time out of your day. We know people are at work, at home, busy doing things, but we absolutely wanted to take the time to first off recognize this day because just in general, youth are often left out of the conversation, overlooked, not valued. So we wanted to be sure to highlight the voices, the experiences, and the truth, the authenticity of youth, and the fact that and acknowledge that there are youth that are living with HIV that need the same resources, that need the same guidance. But may also need some additional resources and services that often aren't talked about, left out. So we wanted to create this space. So thank you all for joining us, for being a part of this conversation. We want to encourage you to be engaged with us. If you have some questions, please put those questions in the chat. If you have some topics that you want us to discuss, put those in the chat as well. I'm watching the chat myself just to check and be nosy. But we really want this to be an engaging conversation. We have some giveaways, so we're going to be raffling off some money. So stick with us, hang out with us for a little bit. This is the part one of a two-part conversation, and there are some amazing panelists coming up. Y'all don't want to miss this. Shout out to you, Richard. Thank you so much for being our amazing host with the most.
I think we back.
We back in there.
Yeah. Thank you, Kendra. Yeah, y'all people, technology will do the things, but we're going to keep this thing going. Thank you again, Kendrick, for setting the tone of that. And thank you all again for being patient with us and joining us on this amazing event that we're having today. As Alfonso said, oftentimes young people's voices are never brought to the table, and we're oftentimes speaking about, but not with young people. And so this is a space we want to invite both young people to the conversation, but those who are providing services for young people living with and impacted by HIV. So thank you, Kendrick.
Of course, of course.
Yes.
Happy to be
So,
here.
first of all, I want you to tell the people more about Tiym as an executive director and as the founder of Tiym.
Absolutely. So the first thing that I'm gonna say about Tiym is that it is a collaboration. So while I am the executive director, it is definitely and most certainly not just my brainchild. So we got together. We a couple of us, yourself, Richard, with He Is Valuable, a good friend of mine, Christian Dacus. He has a multimedia business where he does graphic design, videography, photography. Um, and so we brought our minds together with some of our other really talented, brilliant friends and said, okay, we recognize that HIV in the media is often depicted as either this really heavy thing that somebody is dealing with, or it's the thing that a person is labeled and they're othered. But there aren't a lot of stories where it's a person that's living with HIV that's navigating work, that's navigating families, that's trying to figure out how to date, and it's like we wanted to bring that kind of narrative to the world to say we are so, we often say that we are so much more than our HIV status, but where is that depicted in the media? So we said, let's create this web series that shows, that tells these stories of people that are either navigating living with HIV, navigating PrEP, trying to protect their status, so many things. And so we were like, yeah, that's a great idea, but wait, that's just a web series. Like there are so many other aspects of life. Why don't we have a cooking show? Why don't we start a game show? Why don't we have a news segment? And it completely just blew up to creating a whole network. So it's called This Is Your Moment, TIYM, Time for short. That was very important because we wanted people to not waste another moment, not living in their truth, not wanting to take care of themselves. This right now, every time you hear this is your moment, that is a reminder to let folks know this is your moment to take your life back. If you are not living in your truest self, if you are not feeling comfortable and empowered in who you are, baby, come watch Time Network. And after that, you will realize this is your moment to do all those things. So that's kind of how the brainchild came to be. And even since then, our mission, our vision, let me not say our mission because our mission has stayed the same, but our vision for what the network could be has exponentially grown. So we are talking about of course, including other minorities in the HIV fight. So we want to bring in our Black women, we want to bring in the Latinx population, we want to bring in people of trans experience, to really highlight all of our stories, to one, have a central place that holds all of the information, because we have a lot of people that create content, that have music, that have so many things that speak to what life is and what it's like to thrive with HIV, but there's no place to hold all of that, to archive it, to put it in a place where everybody can come and see it. So we wanted to do that, but also we were like, okay, we wanted to create a space that unifies all of our voices as well, because oftentimes it's conversations about Black men who have sex with men, then it's the Latinx conversation over here, then women are over here. No, we want to bring all of us together so we can create a unified voice, and especially on a day like today where we want to highlight youth. A person that's youth can fall into any of, you can be a young Black woman living with HIV, you can be a young Latinx person, you can be a young Black man who's having sex with men. All of that is inclusive. So we wanted Time to be a place where all of our voices are heard, and everybody feels comfortable in being who they are and telling their story.
Yes. Thank you, Kendrick. Yes. This is why, this is very important for the Tiym Network. Like as Alfonso mentioned, like we want to make sure we highlight not only just HIV and increase education, but provide a platform for people whose voices are often not heard. And so events like this means a lot. And you all support the audience, our sponsors. Shout out to our amazing sponsors, and we'll shout them out throughout the program. But major shout out to Baller Life, the Prize Study, Positive Health, Positive Impact Health Center, Thrive SS, and many other organizations that are supporting us by sharing the message, by sharing the event, and being present today. My next question for you, Fonzo, is so Tiym is an innovative strategy, a collaboration of people living with HIV and impacted using creative approaches, right? In the mission of Tiym, how important is that addressing the impact of youth and young adults living with HIV or impacted by HIV?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kindred. So from the beginning, the majority of our team has been comprised of people living with HIV. But then taking it a step from there, it's been people living with HIV that don't, some work in the HIV field, some don't. Some have their own businesses, some have other talents and skills. And what Tiym Network, what we want to do is create a space for people that are living with HIV to feel comfortable, but also not feel like the only job that you can get is being an outreach worker or being a community health worker. And nothing wrong with people that do those things. I'm a CHW myself, but we have so many people that are living with HIV that are makeup artists, that are in school to become a nurse, that are trying to that sell real estate. Like we have so many opportunities and fields that people want to go into. So we wanted to create a space where it's not just about working with HIV directly out in the field, but also doing it in an innovative way.
Mm-hmm.
So with us having a videographer, we have an amazing writer, we have a photographer, we have people that do community building and community engagement like yourself. We have people that are phenomenal at administration. We have folks that have call center experience that help us with reaching out and bringing in donors. Like we are allowing people's gifts to shine outside of their status, and that's a message that we really want to get out to community. That living with HIV, yes, it's a part of your life, but baby, that doesn't have to limit you to being just working or existing in one space. You can go into law school, you can go to business school, you can do whatever you want to do, start whatever business it is, live your life how you want to. But we wanted to example that through our organization. So we are so excited to be able to give folks the opportunity to act, to sing, to dance, to be extras,
Mm-hmm.
to do things that aren't normally offered to us. And we want to be the leaders in creating more opportunities like that.
Thank you for sharing that, Kendrick. It is important, especially when we talk about addressing stigma. I think it's important for young people to see examples of like people living with HIV thriving and using their gifts, as you mentioned, allowing their gifts to shine beyond their status. So I think it's important for young people of all ages, to see people living with HIV thriving and contributing to society and living their best life. So my next question is, what we do know that young people who are LGBTQ plus identified youth are at higher risk for HIV, right? Or for those living with HIV face unique challenges. What are some best practices that we can offer for those doing work to address the needs of young trans and non-binary folks living with HIV, impacted by HIV?
Absolutely. That is a great question. At the very baseline, I think the place where we have to start is just asking that community, what do you need? What is it that you are in need of right now? And then seeing as an organization where you can fill in some of those gaps and challenges that people are facing. So we at Positive Impact Health Center, I'm gonna take off my Tiym hat, put on my my Positive Impact Health Center's hat. So we have a new youth grant, and where we started was let's just do a survey to our youth ages 13 to 24, and figure out, okay, what are the best hours for you to come and see a provider? What are some of the resources that you need? How is your housing? How is your food security? Um, would you rather us text message you, send you an email, or give you a phone call? Like, it's little things like that, so we can figure out, okay, let's first figure out what's the best way to engage with you. Once we can figure that out, then it's like, okay, let's start asking you some deeper questions about what are some resources that you are in need of. How can we keep your parents engaged if you are on your parents' insurance? Like, these are things that we often don't think about, because especially after you turn 21, it's like, a lot of times it's on you now. Folks either leaving school or starting their jobs and careers. So it's like that's a whole thing that's kind of placed on you. But if nobody explains it, the navigating healthcare can be crazy. So it's so important that we figure out, okay, maybe the first step is starting with health literacy. Let's just talk about what it's like to come into a clinic with us, walk you through the process, give you a tour of the facility, so these are all the things that we do. This is the process of how you do it. I think if we start by explaining what we have, and then asking the community what are the things that you desire, I'm a thorough believer that community knows what community needs, and it's not for anybody else to tell you. So if we ask them, then that allows us to say, okay, well, we can fill in these gaps. Let me see about some of my partners in the community to say, okay, well, maybe some other folks may be able to help in some other areas. And I think once we start creating almost like a safety net for youth to fall into, especially in regards to HIV, I think we start working a lot better as community-based organizations, aid service organizations, but then we create a safe place as a community as a whole.
Thank you. I agree with all that you said. This is to start by asking, right? I think, like we talked about, young people's voices are often silenced. We don't, we talk about them, but not with them. And that's why we want to be intentional, create a space like that, centers that, like, we are listening. It's a time to be aware, to listen, and to be informed, right? And so I think that was a great strategy. It's simply like listening to young people, because young people know what they need.
Exactly, and I love the fact that one of the calls to actions is to listen. Like, sometimes it's not always about giving a lecture, giving a talk. Sometimes it's about, let me give y'all the microphone, let me give y'all the pen, let me give y'all the resources to let us know what we should be doing. And that's what I think a lot of people don't want to kind of get off their high horse and say, let me figure out how we can do our job better.
Right. Totally agree. But before we go and we move on to our next amazing panelist, Kendra, the last question I want to ask you is, as a person living with HIV who was diagnosed at a younger age, what are some words of encouragement you would give to your younger self?
It has literally been 12 years. Wow. 11, 12 years. What I would tell to my younger self is, don't feel like you have to carry this by yourself. Talk to somebody. The people that are around you really do care about you. And it's okay to be all of yourself, HIV included, because I was not just struggling with HIV, but I was struggling with sexuality. I was struggling with gender expression. And I wish somebody would have said, all of you is okay. So that's what I'm going to tell myself. All of you is okay. And that's not just for me, but that's to anybody that needs to hear it. All of you is okay. Be all of you. Find people that are going to love all of you and not just parts of you, because you deserve a whole love.
Okay, Dre, thank you so much. Everyone, be you. Love all of you. That is the message. And that's the message we need to carry to young people who are developing, trying to find themselves. If only we all, imagine if we all could have heard those messages, if we all could have heard that from the people around us, pouring into us in that same way. Again, Ken, for coming in and telling us about time. Shout out to Positive Impact Health Centers for one of our sponsors today of our event, and sponsors of some of the things we're going to be giving out to you all. To find out more about Positive Impact Health Centers. You can visit their website. As Alfonso mentioned, they offer many programs, HIV prevention programs, and other resources for not only just young people, but people in the communities who are marginalized. So check out Positive Impact Health Centers. Kendra, thank you. We'll be
if I
joining us
might,
back
Kendra.
in a little bit for our larger group discussion. We want to thank you for sharing your light with us, like always.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you for hosting this conversation. It is so needed. If I may do a quick shameless plug for Positive Impact Health Centers. So if you live in the Atlanta area or in surrounding counties around the Atlanta area, please know we currently have three locations. Decatur, on the east side, we have one up north in Duluth, and then we are now in Cobb and Marietta area as well with pharmacy services, STI and STD screening and treatment, clinical care for people living with HIV, PrEP services, PEP services. We have behavioral health services on site. Every location, we also have an outpatient substance use program, including harm reduction if that is something that you are in need of as well. And for youth, we have specific programming for youth. We have a safe space drop-in center, and we have individual counseling that we offer on site for free. So
Free.
check us out. Okay. So www.positiveimpacthealthcenters.org. Feel free to call any of our locations. We can connect you to the person that will be able to explain all of this in more detail and give you information on how to sign up on any of our services.
Mm-hmm. You all also offer PrEP services for young people as well, correct? Well,
We
people
surely
mostly,
do.
but young people can also access through your programs as well. So again, check out Positive Impact Health Centers. Thank you again, Kendra, Alfonso. See you in a little bit too.
I'll see you in a little bit.
Again, so the message there, I think there's a lot for us to take, right? To be aware of that. Listen to young people. I think that's our call to action. We're on many calls for action, but we're dealing with young people. But we're asking that we begin to, as my Kendra Alfonso said, like, let's start by listening to young people. And when we mean listening, we mean actively. Not enough to just gather information about young people and hear things and hear our stories, but actually listen and implement strategies and programs and initiatives that really are speaking to the needs of young people after we listen. But next up, we have one of my closest friends, and shout out to Baller Life, who's also one of the organizations of this amazing event today. Next up, we have Mr. Cody Lopez.
Hey everybody, how's it going, Rich?
Hey Cody, what's up, friend? Special shout out to Baller Life. Shout out to Cody, not only because he's one of my closest and best friends, and in life, but in the work that we do since we met doing this HIV and community work. But shout out to Baller for doing all the production stuff, all the stuff that y'all seeing, all the fact that y'all can see this right now. Shout out to Baller for being producing this event. So thank you. I publicly will say thank you, Cody. We say it in private all the time, but I think that people need to, I'm here about giving you your roses. But first, tell the people what Baller Life is and how it started.
Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Cody Lopez. I am the founder and CEO of Baller Life, Black Advocates Leading Revolutions. And our mission is to provide a platform for social entrepreneurs, activists, and advocates to network, share best practices, and amplify their initiatives by creating opportunities for authentic community building, peer-to-peer skill sharing, and for economic empowerment. And we actually got started doing this work in 2016. As you can see behind me on this side, I'm very passionate about working with youth at the college and university level. I've been working with universities since 2012, and I've been working specifically with HBCUs since 2014. And I also serve as the off-campus advisor to Morgan State University's SOUL, Students Open to Unique Love. And we also now have a chapter at Coppin State University as well. So I'm really excited to be working with students at HBCUs. And that's kind of where we are now and have developed into as an organization.
Thank you. Shout out to Baller Life. Yes, it's been a lot. I forgot you know a lot for a long time. Amazing work. It's been amazing to work alongside Cody. And if not, check out Baller Life. Make sure y'all check it out on all social media platforms and check out their website. So you talked a lot about young people on college campuses, and so when we talk about young people, we know college age 18 to 24, right, within that range. And so according to AIDS View, I want to share some information with the people. Um, According to AIDS View, in 2019, 18% of 18 to 24-year-olds with diagnosed HIV had condomless or unprotected sex in the past 12 months, right? Which we know that increases risk for for those who are not necessarily living with HIV who have got diagnosis, but we know that condomless sex or unprotected sex increase the risk, right? And so ages 18 to 24.
You there, Rich?
My bad. I'm back.
You're back.
Here we
Okay.
go. Yeah, so for me, that speaks to the importance of comprehensive sexual education of all, like for young people of all ages, but particularly on college campuses. Can you speak to the importance of bringing like health education, sexual health education to college campuses, and how important it is for us to bring specifically HIV related information?
Yes, most definitely. So, one of the first programs that I did at Morgan State University in 2014 was in collaboration with the Counseling Center, and we were asked to put on the Real AIDS Prevention Project. So, through that project with the State Health Department, we developed an organization called Sex Me, which stood for Safe Experiences Excite Me. And we took that and we formed a male's health and wellness group. And one of the things that came out of those initial experiences was this is a lot of folks' first time having the ability to even have these types of conversations in public. Oftentimes, when it comes to LGBTQ youth or youth in general, when they go off to college, some of them experience what's called a second adolescence. And that's where you get to learn a lot of these things that maybe when you were living in your parents' household, you had some interest in, but didn't have the full autonomy to explore and dive deeper into those subjects. So when you get onto a college campus, you're flooded with all of this freedom and all of this autonomy to do basically whatever you like. And as we began to shape the program on campus, we really had to be aware that this is maybe the first time folks have engaged with this information. They may be coming into this space with a lot of preconceived notions and myths about what sexuality is, about what gender is, about what healthy sexual engagement with each other looks like. So we really had to break some of these things down and get it to the bare roots, the square root of the issues, and really figure out what's going on with the youth. Like Alfonso was saying, you have to be able to have a conversation with folks to figure out where we can kind of have a dialogue and share experiences from both sides. Because there was a lot of things that I didn't know going into that experience that I was taught from the students. And even today, as someone who's grown up in the youth HIV space, coming out in 2012 when I first got diagnosed to now, over a decade later, there are still things that the youth inform me on. They keep me up to date. They let me know kind of what's popular, what's not. Culturally, are things shifting to the point where we can have these conversations in public? And the stigma, while it's still there, it may not be as influential on someone not engaging with these services. So that's been really interesting to learn working at colleges and HBCUs.
Definitely important work. I think we don't often talk about the college age students and making sure that we're intentional in using those spaces to really help. That's when you said that second adolescence. I don't think a lot of people understand that. We're going through a whole new development process, especially if you're a person who identifies LGBTQ. That's a whole multi-layer, self-discovery and stuff like that. And so it's important to have like those types of supports and programs and initiatives. And like you said, and like Alfonso said, and I think that's the whole key point of events like this, is just to listen to young people. Like they're telling us what they need, right? I think oftentimes we do a disservice to young people because we don't think that they not grown enough. They just young. They don't really know what they want, but they know what they need. They know what they want. They know what will work, what will engage their community, what messages they need to hear, what programs, what kind of dialogues they would like to share. So it's very important work doing with colleges and universities, particularly HBCUs, because we know that young Black and brown kids are most at risk for multiple health disparities, right? And so, shout out to you for that work and highlighting that too.
And I kind of look at it as being the off-campus advisor. I look at it as being like a house parent. Like these are, I'm not calling them children to like discredit them, but these are folks who are younger than me, who I'm in their life. If they need support, they need guidance, they need someone to talk to because they're away from their biological family. So I just introduce them to that chosen family aspect, and I just try to be there for my students as much as I can. And it is a very rewarding experience to actually be able to give back to my own HBCU, because I went to Morgan State for a time. So it's really fulfilling and rewarding to do this work.
Yeah. So what are some of the messages? Because we know particularly, we know the impact of PrEP, right? And we know the impact of HIV treatment, right? We talk about U equals U, and PrEP, is really like biomedical intervention to really reduce the risk of spreading HIV and helping people living with HIV reach their best health outcomes, right? What is the conversation on HBCU campus or the work that you've been doing around, because we know that the uptake of PrEP amongst brown people is subpar, to say the lack of a better term, and even more subpar for young people, right? So young Black and brown people are not up in the uptake of PrEP as much as their white counterparts, right? So what is the dialogue or some successful messaging and engagement around those messages that you saw?
Okay, so we actually went to a ViV Healthcare conference a few months ago. And one of the things that we're going to be launching on the campus is the Risk to Reasons campaign. So we're reshaping the conversation around what it means to be engaged with HIV prevention, treatment, and education services on campus. So instead of giving folks all of the risks and making it seem very daunting, we're going to share with them reasons on how they can protect each other and reasons why they should protect their community. I think it's specifically on HBCU campuses where we're specifically talking about people of color, and when Black women are a lot more impacted by HIV than white women. I think that's the conversation to have with those men on those campuses, to bring in not only the LGBTQ focus group, but also just men in general on campus. I think kind of shifting and breaking down some of these silos on campuses have been really helpful, because it breaks down those stereotypes. You have those conversations that you may not have been able to have when you were in high school. You're doing it in a safe space, and there's that network to kind of help you grow. So I think, changing the conversation from explaining the risks and then helping to identify some reasons, that's going to be very impactful as we move forward with destigmatizing HIV testing and treatment resources on Morgan State University's campus.
Yeah. The internet is just not trying to be my best friend today, but we still here. We in here. I hope you all heard what Cody was saying, even though I went away. But yeah, I think that's very important when we talk about. Shout out to ViV Healthcare for that amazing campaign, educational campaign around From Risk to Reason. I think that language matters, and we talk about this all the time. Language does matter. A lot of, particularly in the HIV space and community building space and civil rights movements and LGBT movement, language matters, right? There's a lot of stigma with language, so I think risk does have a negative connotation that could shun young people away, feel shame and guilt when you hear things like risk. But when you hear things like reason, it mobilizes people to, see, normalize the conversation for an individual level, but then they say, hey, like you said, reasons to protect my community, reasons to protect myself. So I love that you all bringing that to HBCU campuses. So shout out to ViV Healthcare for that, and looking forward to hearing some more about what that looks like. Before we move on to our next panelist and bring you back later, I want to ask you one more question. Same thing I asked Alfonso. You spoke to your journey when you were first diagnosed in 2012. So that's been 11 years going on?
Yes. It's a long time.
So 11 years ago, I'm quite sure you've grown. I know you've grown. I've seen your amazing growth, and you've been that beacon of light for so many people, right? But you may not have had that beacon of light for yourself when you were first diagnosed. I would ask, the motion of the event today is, what are some encouraging words you get to your younger self?
Okay, so this is it's interesting because I've grown. So there's at certain points I would say certain things, but as I continue to grow, I would say different things. So now just me being the person that I am now, if I had to say something to my 21-year-old self, I would say I would say love yourself a little bit more. Be kinder to yourself. Um, Perfection is not your friend, and I think that you find beauty in the mistakes, and that's where a lot of the growth happens. And it's okay to do that. I think kind of being in this space, I've had to grow up kind of somewhat publicly. Some stuff I just overshared. But if you just kind of focus on yourself, focus on the things that you want to improve on, and just not really care too much about what other people have to say. I think that's the gist of what I'm trying to say. Don't really take it too seriously, and keep moving forward.
Thank you, Cody. And thank you for sharing that message. Keep going, keep pushing. I know I totally wish a lot of young people had people like you in their life, like the amazing work that you are doing with Baller, with the amazing young people at Morgan. I'm excited to see, and I hope you all listen and take these best practices and things that you can implement right on your on campuses and your own programs and your own communities. These are things that can be easily replicated. And thank you again for sharing those gems with us, Cody. And we're gonna bring you back a little later too.
Thanks, Richard.
Most definitely. Thank you, Cody. Again, it's important for us to remember that this is a time for us to listen, to be aware, and to be informed. And I hope you all are learning some amazing strategies, some best practices on how we can really be more engaging and impactful amongst young people who are impacted and living with HIV. So next up, we have the amazing, the one, the only, the Queen, Miss Marnina Miller. We invite you to the stage.
Oh, thank you for that, Rich.
Of
Hi.
course. Hey, Marnina.
Hello.
What's up? Tell the people, you do amazing work. First of all, tell the people who you are and what your involvement with the HIV field, and tell the people about Southern AIDS Coalition and the work you do at SAC.
Okay, cool. So I guess I'll start off with me personally. My name is Marnina Miller. I am a young woman openly living with HIV in the Deep South. A lot of my work really revolves around telling our stories. It also revolves around advocacy work and activism. And the communities that I mainly work around are young folks, Black women, and also LGBTQ folks. The work I currently do right now at Southern AIDS Coalition is I'm the community outreach associate, where I go all around the Deep South, really doing a lot of our people living with HIV training. So I spearhead our Lead Academy, which is a training for people that want to become HIV activists. We literally come to your organization and help train you and help really get you motivated to go out there and be the best activist that you can be. And we give you the tools and the skill set to do so. I also spearhead our Unity Workshop, which really focuses in on people that are newly diagnosed or people that are really struggling with the diagnosis. So we do a lot of work around internal stigma and external stigma with Unity Workshop. Currently at Southern AIDS Coalition, we are a part of the Compass Coordinating Center. So we have the Compass Initiative currently, and so what we do is we do a lot of grant making for a lot of organizations like Time Network, who is doing amazing work out there, who's really trying to reduce stigma in so many different facets around HIV. And also within my own personal Marnie the Queen brand, I am a social media influencer.
Yes,
And
she
so through
is.
and so through my TikToks and my Instagram posts and Facebook, I really talk about the HIV epidemic and how it has impacted my life. And I originally started my journey doing HIV activism work through my own diagnosis 9 years ago. I was at a HBCU, young and turned, having fun with my friends, and really just exploring my life and my own sexuality. And I contracted HIV. And so from that point on, I was just really depressed and really sad about it. But then once I got around Black women that were living and thriving with HIV, I was like, oh, they can do it. Oh, I'm going to do it too. And so that really fueled my activism.
Yes. Let's give a shout out to Marnina, the Queen. Like seriously, you and
Oh, you there, Rich? Y'all, his internet is currently acting up, but uh, okay.
And we
Oh,
here.
there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah. They got see having people like collaboration, people feeling when we need to, got each other's back. But what I was
Yeah.
gonna say is I want to celebrate you, Marnita, because your messaging is powerful for not even just young people, for Black women, for Black people, for people living with HIV. You utilizing your social media platforms to share your narrative is beyond the other work that you do. Like that in and of itself is powerful and it's worth celebrating. And it changes lives. And so I appreciate you for that. And so shout out to you for continuing to do that. I look up to you when it comes to the content creation stuff and your creativity and being able to share your story. It's amazing, and it reaches young people. So that needs to be celebrated. So my next question to you, as you talked about Black women, right? And we know that Black women face unique challenges when it comes to HIV, right? So I want to share another statistic based on the CDC and AIDS View said that in 2020, young Black women made up the majority, which is 61% of all young women aged 13 to 24 living with HIV, right? And so that means that what we know is that young people face unique challenges, right? But particularly young Black women and Black women in general face unique challenges when it comes to HIV and their risk, and even Black women and young Black women living with HIV. Can you speak to that and how important it is for us to be innovative and develop strategies to engage young Black women around HIV prevention, care, and treatment?
Oh, I would first say listen to young Black women. They are the subject matter experts over their own lives. And when I speak today about my own journey and things around women, I'm really talking about cis women because I know that my sisters of trans experience have a whole nother layer of transphobia, which is unfair to them and it's just so dehumanizing a lot of times. So I'm gonna just speak on my experience as a cis Black woman that's also queer. I feel like programming has not been tailored towards young Black women. Well, I know it has not been tailored towards young Black women. There has been a lot of spaces that I have been lovingly infiltrated on,
Mm-hmm.
which were provided by so many different organizations, but a lot of them landed towards cis Black same gender loving men. They didn't really lend towards me. And so I would kind of move myself into the space because y'all are my brothers and my sisters in the movement, but they weren't really geared towards me. And so I think that it really does a disservice to young Black women when we're not inviting them to be a part of preventative services. I also think we traditionally don't talk to young Black women about HIV, period. Folks are so hell bent on really controlling the childbearing aspect of young women. Like don't be a statistic. You don't want to be a teen mom. Well, even legislators are trying to control our reproductive health by passing these crazy laws around reproductive justice. And then you even got churches and school systems really teaching abstinence, which we have shown statistically does not work.
Mm-hmm.
Then on top of that, you have the socioeconomic issues that impact Black women. So Black women are the only race of women who date outside of their race more than any other race of women.
Mm-hmm.
We are also the only race of women that out earn our men. And 91% of Black women who have contracted HIV did so through heterosexual contact.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that Black women, a lot of times, are not at the front of condom negotiation. We know that people that are more susceptible to receiving an HIV diagnosis are folks that are on the poverty line or below it. And so there are so many unique factors that impact the health of young Black women. And then when you think about even when saying the word young, so that 13 to 24-year-old woman, she's going to be on the poverty line. She's in college, she's young, may or may not have a job that may be adequate enough for her skill set. And then on top of that, Black women have the lowest earning wage of any race and gender of a person in the United States. And on top of that, most Black women are living currently in the South. And so you just have a myriad of issues that impact Black women. But I would say the folks who are creating programming or creating any type of work around young Black women or Black women in general, let them be at the forefront. I think MIPA is so important. The meaningful involvement of Black women. Don't just put a Black woman on your panel or put a Black woman at a community advisory council. No, put the Black woman as the ED.
Mm-hmm.
There are so few executive directors that are Black women that work in HIV Inc. And so I think it's so many issues that impact the health outcomes of Black women.
Big fact. Thank you for highlighting that. Like as you mentioned, I think meaningful involvement, right? Like if we recognize that Black women have a unique challenge and face many disparities, a myriad of disparities because of the intersectionality of their identities, makes them vulnerable to HIV, and then those who are living with HIV not reaching their most optimal health outcomes because of those very same social determinants of health, right? And so we challenge you all, like as Marnita said, who are developing programs, initiatives, or trying to engage young Black women, start by listening, which all our panelists have talked about. Listen to young Black women, listen to them, listen to their needs, right? Also get politically involved because as Marnita just mentioned, like there are politicians that are taking away the rights of women, not even just young women, but women at large. Or get involved with those things and learn about how these policies are impacting these young Black women, particularly from various angles. And then just bring innovation to the table, but also be meaningfully involved.
I think Rich camera went out, but I was just saying being meaningfully involved doesn't mean just not adding us to the putting us on a little checklist, making sure that we are at the table and that we're not on the menu.
Big facts. Good way to end it. That's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you, Marnita, for sharing those gems with the people. I want to ask you your next question, more personal to you and your journey as you share. Now, being, like you said, you're empowered because you're in spaces with powerful Black women, powerful people living with HIV. You're in platforms and spaces where you feel empowered and you're constantly encouraged to take care of yourself and understanding that you are more than your diagnosis and you can thrive with HIV, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you first diagnosed, like you said, you were on the HBCU campus, living your best life as a young person, and you got this diagnosis. And you may have been going through, like you said, depression and not feeling worthy or valuable, right? What are some words that you would give to your younger self that you've learned now?
I would say these three words: you are enough. I think a lot of times I didn't hear that. I didn't know that. I didn't know about body autonomy, that this is my body. Nobody has a right to it. Young Black women are policed as soon as they come out the womb because the first thing folks want to say is, oh, don't dress too fast, or don't sit on this boy's, sit on a man's lap. Or even when I was coming up, I was always a heavier girl. So my mom would be like, oh, wear a girdle because you don't want boys to look at your butt. Black women's bodies are policed from the time that they are like 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never got the time to really develop my own identity. And I would say to myself, I'm enough. I'm enough.
I love that. You are enough and you are valuable. She is valuable, y'all. Like she is.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that. I have one more question I want to highlight because you talked about the work that SAC does, which is amazing work. Like one of the things being a Compass initiative that focuses on really helping build organizations that are doing work in this deep South to address HIV through stigma, through organizational development, and now with faith-based, working with faith-based organizations. What I wanted to highlight again as a statistic is that when we talk about young people and new HIV diagnoses in 2020, the states with the highest rates of young people ages 13 to 24 years old newly diagnosed with HIV were 4 of those states were in the deep South, right? So number 1 was Washington, D.C., but then it followed up with Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And so, like, I want you to speak to that. Like, we know that more than 50% of people living with HIV, and particularly within Black and Brown communities, are living in the deep South, right? Like that's where heavily concentrated HIV, people living with HIV, and heavily that's also not coincidence that heavily that's where African American and Black and people of color are heavily concentrated within the United States. So it would not surprise us that young Black and Brown people would be most impacted in the deep South, right? Can you speak to those issues that kind of like make young people living in the South even more at risk and vulnerable to HIV?
So I think one thing that SAC does so well is we are embedded in the South, and so we cover from DC on down to Texas, and so we are an organization that's trying to end the HIV epidemic in the South, and the heavy burden of HIV in the South, and particularly those deep Southern states like you were talking about, is really those socioeconomic factors like poverty and unemployment. Poverty is the lowest, is the highest in the South. Unemployment is the highest in the South. And also, we also know that there's no Medicaid expansion. In fact, Medicaid is the largest source of coverage for people living with HIV in the South, but 9 of the 16 states in the South do not have Medicaid expansion. And so these places are already experiencing high impacts of health disparities, and now they have the extra burden of the HIV epidemic. Then you couple that with the added layer of transphobia, homophobia, and racism, and you have that perfect storm of the HIV epidemic continuing to be fueled, especially when we talk about also the Bible Belt being in the South as well.
Good point. That's very important. Thank you for painting that picture for us. So, like, thinking about that, we're talking about adults in general are already at risk in the Deep South because of the myriad of those issues. But we know that youth and young adults who are oftentimes, we're not listening to them. They're being born into systems and spaces and places that they had no contribution of creating, but they're trying to develop and be themselves. That makes them even more vulnerable. So if you're a young Black woman living in the Deep South where there's no Medicaid expansion and your parents are living below, your parents are living below the poverty line, you live in a place, of course, where racism is running rampant. Don't add on the fact that you may be a young Black queer woman, the homophobia, all those layered issues that young people are facing, that we as adults are facing. And we can't even get it together around that. So imagine young people dealing with that in systems and political environments that do not prioritize their livelihood. So it puts them at higher risk. And so we need to build strategies around how we address that and get the meaningful involvement of young people living in the South, particularly young Black and brown people living in the South, to be involved in HIV.
And then you have people also pushing conservative views on folks, because currently in Texas, we have where PrEP is not being covered because of legislators. Legislators in Texas recently overturned the fact that PrEP does not have to be covered by healthcare providers or your healthcare insurance companies, which is ludicrous, because there is no other way for folks to be able to access PrEP, because PrEP is extremely expensive. And so there are other programs that, luckily are out there. There are community-based organizations and aid service organizations that are trying their hardest to do the best they can to help cover some of these services. But medication is still relatively expensive. And so PrEP also has the lowest uptake in the South as well. So it's a lot of issues that definitely impact Southern young folks.
Yes. And thank you for highlighting that. We're going to talk a little bit more about those issues when we bring everybody back on for our panel discussion. But Marnita, I want to thank you for painting that picture for our people, and thank you for continuing to do this work and uplift the issues that not only impact young people, but Black and brown people, particularly Black women. And again, we celebrate you, Queen, and I'll see you back in just a little bit.
All right. See you soon. Thank you for having me.
Most definitely. So those of us who may be just joining us, if you're joining us in the comments, please go ahead and drop some questions that we want to bring up to our discussion later when we bring back the whole panel and we do our Q&A. So we're inviting you all, if you're watching right now, thank you for joining hashtag NYHAAD Tiym Talk, a national live discussion on National Youth HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. So we want to invite you all, if you are watching us right now, we want you to put your questions in the comments so we can ask our panelists at the end. But also, we want to hear where you are coming in from. So if you will drop the name and where you are watching in to the program today from, so put your name and drop that down in the comments and where you're tuning in from so we can shout you out on the live. And next up, we'll have our last panelist. And then we'll do our live panel discussion with everybody. We're going to bring everybody back together and have a large group discussion. So next up, we have Mr. Terrell Parker, my good Briss.
Hey, Rich, what's up?
What's up? Shout out to Terrell. Well, Terrell and Marnina are doing amazing work in there in Las Vegas right now. If you all do not know, the biomedical summit that MAC is hosting is happening. So they're taking time out their busy schedules to join us. So let's celebrate them and thank them for being here. Thank you, Terrell, for being here. First of all, tell the people who you are. Tell the people the work that you do and the work that you do particularly at MAC.
Sure. So, as Richard said, my name is Terrell. I use he, him pronouns. I am one of the managers in the Center to End Epidemics at NMAC. If you're familiar with NMAC, we've been around for about 36 years now. Our mission is NMAC Leads with Race to urgently fight for health equity and racial justice to end the HIV epidemic in the United States. So I work in the Center to End Epidemics. So we have a variety of projects that are really about educating, empowering, and training both the community and the HIV workforce to end the HIV epidemic in the United States. My project in particular is called Escalate, which stands for Ending Stigma Through Collaboration and Lifting All to Empowerment. And basically, our job is, or our goal is to eliminate HIV stigma around the United States throughout the Ryan White Care Continuum. So we work with any organization around the United States that is either directly funded or a subrecipient receiving fundings from Ryan White Parts A through D. We've designed an innovative training curriculum that focuses on a lot of those intersections that Marnita talked about. So HIV-related stigma, how does it intersect with racism, homophobia, xenophobia, classism, privilege, all of those things, and how does it kind of combine to impact, in particular, people living with HIV, people who are vulnerable for HIV, and also people who work in the HIV workforce. So it's all about ending HIV stigma, because our motto at Escalate is you can't end the HIV epidemic if we don't get real about ending stigma. So I like to say that we're on a mission to end stigma, to end the HIV epidemic. So that's a little bit about my program and what we do at NMAC.
Thank you, Terrell. Yes, again, I always say that. And shout out to NMAC. Yeah, I too am a proud consultant of NMAC, and I do Elevate program, which is, I would say, like a sister program to Escalate, where we focus on, in the very same way with Ryan Wright, service organizations and subrecipients, building the employability and the leadership of people receiving those services, the people living with HIV, and the staff who may be providing those services through Ryan White. So shout out to Escalate and Elevate and doing that amazing work. I agree with you, brother, that stigma is our biggest fight, right? That's why I think programs like Escalate and other stigma reduction programs are what we really, a lot of our focus should be, because people are living intersectional lives, like you said, and then those things are putting people at risk for HIV. And if we are living with HIV, it's impacting our health outcomes negatively, right? So stigma is something that we need to prioritize. And when we talk particularly about young people, like Marnita was saying, like if we take all of the myriad of things that we face, those intersectional issues, and we add on the age, the youth age, and being young adults in the way, that America views young people in general, we disempower young people. We don't listen to them. They're high risk for a lot of things beyond health disparity. Adding all of those things and the stigma around that is something that we need to continue to address. Yeah. So I want you to add more and talk about, like, how does stigma impact young people, and how does that contribute to young people being disproportionately impacted by HIV, particularly young Black and brown people of color who are really at highest risk for HIV?
Absolutely. So I guess I'll start with the question about young people and just stigma in general. So in our Escalate training, we talk about two things on the first day of Escalate. We ask people, or we talk about how does stigma show up in care facilities. So let's say, for example, if I'm a young person going to get tested, or if I'm a young person who is going to receive services, stigma shows up within healthcare facilities. But really, the more that we do these trainings and the more that we talk to people around the country, because we've done focus groups. Even before we wrote the curriculum for the Escalate training, we did focus groups with various communities. African Americans, Latinx communities, American Indian, Alaska Native communities, trans communities, just trying to get a diverse perspective from people who are vulnerable to HIV. And in each one of those focus groups, one of the driving factors, when we asked the question, what is a barrier for ending the HIV epidemic in the United States? Stigma was one of the highest barriers across the focus groups. We work with health departments, we talk to health departments, we work with community-based organizations, clinics, everyone. Everyone is talking about stigma. Everyone's in an epidemic plan, everyone's local plan it calls us to address stigma because it does impact everyone in so many different ways, but especially when we talk about youth. So we talk a lot about what does HIV stigma look like for people as they go in and receive services, but from all of my conversations, HIV stigma really starts in community before we even get to the point of walking to a door to get tested or walking into a door to receive services or care. So like, what does stigma look like in community? I mean, stigma looks like gossip a lot of times, gossiping about someone's health status, about their HIV status, speculating about someone's HIV status, something that's a common term that we hear like on Twitter and on social media. We now call it health reads, where you know someone's health status and then you try to belittle them or make them feel inferior because of their health status. We see a lot of social media bullying. We see a lot of publicly disclosing and outing someone's status on social media. Just gossip and misinformation. Sometimes folks disclose someone's HIV status and they're not even a person living with HIV. A lot of times when I'm talking to younger people, like there's this feeling the need to warn your friend. Like if I learn someone's HIV status, I have to warn everybody that this person is living with HIV. And if you're gonna have sex with them, you should just know that they're living with HIV. But that's stigmatizing. And a lot of the work that I did when I very first started working in HIV, because I've been working in HIV for over 15 years now, was really about working with young people, helping them to disclose their status to their family, because a lack of family support is also a result of HIV related stigma. So I'll never forget a young person that I was working with. He had been living with HIV for 5 years. He was out of care and he had two goals. His first goal was to get back into care, and his second goal was to be able to share with his mom that he was a person living with HIV. So a lot of our conversations were about how to have that conversation, being prepared for his mother's reaction. But it was a beautiful thing to see when we are able to break down stigma and he was able to become empowered, have that conversation with his mom, and then his mom became his biggest support system, went to every appointment with him, checked on him to make sure he was taking his medication, like really became an advocate. But stigma prevents us from feeling comfortable from sharing things with our family. That also leads to isolation. And one thing that we often don't talk about is just coercion and also intimate partner violence. Because I'm a person living with HIV and my partner is aware of my status. I've had plenty of conversations with lots of folks who then get into a very coercive relationship. Like, you have to stay with me because I accept your HIV. No one else will. Or you have to stay with me, or I'm going to publicly disclose your HIV so that no one will want to be with you. So, like, what does HIV stigma look like in community? Those are some examples. And I've aged out of the youth category, so I'm 34. I'm no longer considered a youth. I've aged out, but I still try to be like involved to have conversations with people in my community because I'm a person living with HIV. Been living with HIV for 2 years now, so it's become easier for me to like disclose my HIV status when I'm about to have sex with someone. And from that perspective, it's almost made me have like a blind spot for how pervasive stigma really is. And so when I'm out and I'm having conversations with people, and in particular, it was the summer I was out and there was a bunch of young people having a conversation, and they were talking about going to, I'm not gonna say the city, but they were talking about visiting a city in the South that's like heavily populated. You probably know. And how they wanted to go, but they were like, "Oh, I'm not trying to come back with that thing." And I'm like, "Well, what is that thing that y'all talking about?" They're like, "Well, I'm not trying to come back with HIV because I heard that everybody that lives in that city has HIV, and and I don't want to come back and be sick." And they were just saying a lot of those terms that we no longer use to describe people living with HIV, those stigmatizing terms. They were using a lot of those terms. And then in that moment, I said, "Well, y'all do know that I'm a person living with HIV, right?" And then they were like, "Oh, no, we didn't know." Like, then some of them were like, "Well, why would you just share that in front of a room full of people that you don't know?" And like, I believe it was Alfonso earlier that said it's important for young people in our community to see people living with HIV so that it breaks down that stigma, because I've been a young person afraid to get tested because I didn't want to know the results because HIV is scary. So when we look at stigma, we look at how stigma is perpetuated. It's really perpetuated because of a lack of knowledge and morality. So a lot of times that lack of knowledge, that fear, not wanting to disclose, a fear about, your health. A lot of times that prevents people from even getting tested. Sometimes that prevents people from getting into care. So when we talk about stigma, it has a lot of really huge impacts. One thing we talk about in Escalate is how stigma leads to sickness. And I have this really great graphic that I share with people, and it really breaks down how HIV stigma really impacts like people's health, like their ability to go to the doctor. It impacts their ability to take their medication, to stay virally suppressed, and to have a high CD4 count. Like nothing else. If everything else is going right in your life, but you're being stigmatized, there's a direct impact on people's health because they don't want to go to the doctor. They don't want to get tested. So I think that's why Escalate is so important, because I don't want to look up in 15, 20 years and we've ended the HIV epidemic in certain communities, but we haven't ended the epidemic in my own community.
Right.
If we're really going to end a HIV epidemic in our communities, we have to talk about stigma, because I know someone that's been stigmatized. I know people that have died from complications of HIV because they were ashamed, or because they were embarrassed, or because they never told anyone their status. They kept the secret. They didn't go to the doctor. So there are like real implications. It's life or death for some people. And depending on where you live in the country, depending on your community, stigma looks worse. And they're actually starting to be able to pinpoint data that shows like places that have a higher rate of stigma, like they have lower viral suppression. More people are likely to not be engaged in care. So I always tell people, like, from our perspective, our goal is to keep people healthy. And how we do keeping people healthy is, if you're a person living with HIV, making sure you're undetectable or have a reduced viral load, and to make sure that your CD4 count is high. HIV stigma impacts that. So we got to talk about stigma, and we got to do this work because it's really, really important. And I'm tired of seeing a lot of my peers not get the services, or not welcome the help that they could get because they're so afraid and because they're so ashamed.
Yeah. Stigma is slow layer, and it has to be like you said. I think we have to focus. If we focus on ending the epidemic, we have to focus on ending stigma. I think that's a powerful message, because stigma does have negative health outcomes for people. It's proven, right? And we talk about that a lot, particularly even in Elevate. Stigma is a large conversation, and the impact of stigma, how that stops people from getting tested, how it stops people from going to the doctor, staying engaged in care, um, taking the medication. Like, it's real. And then to add on, like, stigma is layered, right? One thing is intersectional stigma, right? It's one thing to be stigmatized as a person living with HIV, but if you stigmatized because you're a person who is of the LGBT experience, if you stigmatized because you're black, if you're stigmatized because you're a woman, like, all of those layered on top of being a person living with HIV, that stigma combined, like, it's going to have negative outcomes, like you said. And so when we talk about young people, that's a lot. That's a lot to carry. There's a large battle to fight. And so we have to continue to not only address stigma, but involve young people in those conversations around, like, like you said, what does stigma look like to you? Like, how does it show up? What are the conversations that you have in the community, and figure out ways that we can get in and change that culture and shift that dialogue and change the way that those conversations being had. And something else you mentioned, and even as we were planning this and we talked about this, like the age group for youth is 13 to 24, but what we find statistically, there is a constant, a slow but steady uprise in new HIV diagnosis amongst 25 to 34-year-olds too. And so for me, that always speaks to what we're not doing to provide services for those individuals when they're 13 to 24, who didn't have that was it, whether it was stigma, whether it was an education, whether they have access to PrEP. It was multiple things that are putting that person at risk, or that now they've aged out of that 13 to 24. Now we're getting into that 25 to 34 where we fit in, right? Like that's our age range, and finding that people are being newly diagnosed within that age range too. And so that means combined 13 to 34-year-olds, which the youngest people in America, are making almost half of new HIV diagnoses in the country. So that's the youngest people in America. We are at most risk, right, for multiple reasons, and so that heavily is around that stigma, that conversation. That even if we get older, we're not going to the doctor. We won't get this tested because that's not something we normal, like culturally, don't do, right? So I think that was something that you brought up, and it was very important that if we don't address this among young people now, they still could be at risk when they get out of this youth space, right? Young adults and become young adults until they're in full adulthood. So I think that was something worth saying.
Right,
But
definitely. Even myself, like I said, I'm 34. I've been living with HIV for 2 years. So I acquired HIV at 32, so I was right in that 30 to 35. And I kind of got, I waited until after the misconception is that you do a lot of risky things when you're younger. But for me, it was like in my 30s, and I felt like I had escaped it, like I'm not gonna lie. So I always tell folks, one of my good mentors, Dr. Tatiana Moten, says HIV possible, we're all HIV possible. So we should all just make sure that we're doing the best that we can to protect ourselves in whatever way that looks like, protect our sexual health and our whole body health overall. But I definitely think that there are more spaces are needed for young people to talk about HIV in a safe space, to get the knowledge that they need, to hear from other people living with HIV, because I'm also surprised at the number of young people in my community that come to me for support, because I have been a person over the last 2 years that's living with HIV. And it's really kind of disappointing because I'm seeing so many young people that are still like newly diagnosed, and kind of sometimes it makes me feel like I'm failing. Like, what are we doing wrong? That all these young people, and even hearing some of the horror stories, like it's not like they just get diagnosed and they have just a smooth transition in care. I hear these stories for young people who, I know a young person that was diagnosed at 18 and it took 2 years before they got into care. And they were almost, to the point of, well, they were hospitalized, really ill. And it just really breaks my heart to know that we're living in an age where there's so much information, there's so much technology, and for some reason, I think we're still missing the mark when it comes to like getting the message to young people that there is life after HIV, that you can live with HIV and be happy. But I always tell people you got to be there to see that happiness. And part of you being able to be there to see that happiness is being able to take advantage of the life-saving medications that we have access to now. Like I take my Biktarvy once a day, every day. I know some people they're going to Cabenuva, they're taking the shot. Some people are on multiple regimens because a single pill don't work. Whatever works for you, whether it's a single pill you take once a day, whether it's a shot you take every 60 days, there are options out there for you to live happy. HIV is a chronic condition now. And it's chronic, it's manageable. And hey, I still feel like I live a really great life, like living with HIV. Some days I forget that I'm a person who lives with HIV. I do realize that that's a privilege, that everybody's not able to have that. But like I said, for me, for a lot of people I know who are living with HIV, life is good, but you have to be around to experience life getting better. So I would just tell those young people, love yourself. Like Marnita said, we're all enough. You deserve to be here. You have a right to the medications. You have a right to the treatment. You have a right to that optimal care. And if you feel like you're not getting it, call somebody like Rich or call someone like me in your community. And we will advocate for you. We will fight for you, and we will make sure that you're okay because the young people really are our future. You know, and we got to do what we can to make sure that they're healthy and that they're here to take over for us and lead. You know, we got to pass the baton sometime. You know, so I'm just excited to work with more young people to get the message out and to make an impact and to hopefully feel like we're preparing this generation with more than what we had because we have more than what we had when we were 2021. You know, prep wasn't a thing when I was 19.
True.
You know, like honestly. So there's so many more tools, there's so many more resources. I just want to make sure that we can get them to the young people.
Most definitely. Yes, I agree with you 100%. Like our young people are our future, and a lot of politicians and people are making policies and legislation saying that they're focused on young people, but it's not showing. It's not showing up. And so, like when we talk about really being like the children are our future or our youth are our future, like we have to be intentional about creating spaces like this where we uplift their challenges and uplift their voices, because oftentimes they don't get to be heard, right? And we got to use our privilege as maybe young adults or older adults who not too far away from them to like really elevate their voices, the challenges that they face, so that we can bring them to the table and create space and listen to them, allow them to create strategies that are going to work within their communities. And so I thank you for that, Terrell, and the message of empowerment of like, you are enough. You deserve to be heard. There are resources out there, right? But we just gotta get young people to know about those resources and feel empowered to like engage in those resources. And then we also gotta make sure that when they go get those resources, that when they show up, the people that are providing them those services are embracing them, are listening to them, are engaging with them, are seeing them as a whole person and not as a number.
Like I was talking to a young person. I'll just give a simple example. And they were saying, they really needed a gas card. And I was saying, well, go up to your, you get services at this organization, go up there and get a gas card. And then they were saying, well, I just started going there. I don't want to ask for too much too soon. I don't want to be looked at one of those people like who's begging. And I was like, please, like those things are there for you. The day you sign up to be a client or to receive service at the organization, you have access to everything. First day, take advantage of that, but too often what I've seen with young people who don't have like a peer navigator or a linkage to care specialist or a really kind, caring like case manager or care coordinator, they do kind of get shifted like in every direction. And they're not knowledgeable of like the system. So a lot of times they're not able to navigate. They don't know how to advocate for themselves a lot of times, so that's why I think once again, it's just important for us to make sure that we have close connections and close relationships with the youth so that we can hear from them, so that we can know what's going on. Because we were youth not too long ago, but like the world is dramatically different than it was 10 years ago, with technology, with the pandemic, with prep, long acting injectable prep, long acting treatment. Like this thing is different than it was 10 years ago. So we really got to make sure, and I think that's why it's important for us to keep lifting it up, that we're always listening to youth. And it don't always got to be a formal way. It don't always got to be a focus group. Like focus groups are great for us to get that, quantitative, qualitative data that we can use for our reports, all that jazz. But sometimes it's just about being in your community, talking to the young people, not looking down on them and telling them, oh, y'all foolish or y'all doing this and we wasn't doing that when we were y'all age. Like, no, just connect to the young people, have conversations with them, be a trusted source for the young people, and they'll open up because they're dealing with their own type of stigma, like you said, because then you add age on top of it, and then that's a whole nother dynamic, So we just got to love the young people. We got to support them. We have to show up and we got to listen.
Most definitely. That's right. That's why today is so important. It's a time for us to show up, to listen, to hear them, to be aware of what's going on for young people and their unique challenges. And so, Terrell, thank you. In a minute, we're going to bring everybody back up. I thank you for sharing the importance of us addressing stigma and involving young people and the way that stigma shows up for young people. and how times are different, right? We have so many resources for this generation, right? Access to prevention, care, treatment, research, all the things, but there's something that's stopping people from accessing those things. And like you mentioned, our fight is against stigma for all people living with HIV or at risk for HIV, which is everybody. But stigma is the thing that we need to fight. And thank you for that. And I'll see you in just a moment when I bring up everybody back. But if you are just joining us, thank you. We want to make sure that you all tell us where you are tuning in live from. Also, let us know in the comments a question that you may have for our panelists so I can be able to share those questions with our amazing folks here. And so we can continue on this dialogue. The conversation has been great. I want to first celebrate all of my panelists. These are people that are not only are doing amazing work, they're not only amazing innovators and continue to contribute to the HIV movement, but a larger society at large. But these are people that I get the privilege of calling my friends. These are people that I connect with that empower me as a person living with HIV. And as we know, community support is important, and that's something that young people definitely need as well. Like having support of community is amazing. To even create spaces like this with amazing people like this is empowering to me as a person living with HIV. And just imagine if young people had spaces and places where they can connect with amazing individuals like this on a regular basis to be able to talk about life and goals. And sometimes it may be about treatment and research in HIV, and sometimes it's just like I want to kick it. I want to, I want to talk about it. I want to kiki. I just want to connect with somebody. I want to be seen and heard and know that I mean something to somebody. That's important, and a lot of young people are struggling to even find that. And so to get young people to understand the importance of HIV testing, and the importance of retaining and care and taking your medication, and engaging that, they need to feel like they matter, right? It's important that they feel valued, that they understand that their lives have meaning to even be engaged in something like HIV testing or treatment and things like that. So I want to uplift all of y'all for sharing y'all gems and all the amazing work that you all do. I always tell y'all this stuff, but it's been a privilege to moderate this conversation with you all and to host this event. So, but we're going to invite our guests to ask questions to you all. But I will start off with a question. Should I add layer? What is the big ask that we have to organizations, right? Because this is a call to action. As we organize this, we said this is going to be a space not only for young people to speak, but a call to action to organizations and service providers that seek to empower young people around HIV. What is your one big ask of these organizations and entities that are set out to serve and make a more positive impact?
Oh, I think we might have lost Richard as he comes back.
Hi, I will go just to start the conversation. First of all, I want to thank you all for being part of this conversation. I definitely love the space of hearing your stories and the power of storytelling. It's definitely really impactful as we navigate these spaces of talking with youth, and this is why we did this. Questions or things you would say to your younger selves, because there were a lot of conversations that we did not have as we were younger that we need to share with these future generations. So, as we are these beacons of light, unfortunately, we aging out, age before beauty, but we still look good. So, the big thing is, still being able to connect with the communities. And I think a lot of organizations and providers and healthcare practices, they need to be able to connect. They need to be able to have those conversations. We don't want to make them feel like a child, because going and navigating these spaces, this is bigger than some adults actually do. So for them to have that power to advocate for themselves, for them to advocate, for their own health rights and, for their mental health and for all the aspects of health, I definitely want to challenge healthcare providers and health practitioners to go ahead and have those conversations. And I think this is something that we're definitely doing in the All of Us research program and the Pride study, because, we're going to be talking to younger audiences. And as we navigate in that conversation, talking about, research and health research, it's important that people understand how to navigate that space and how you can leverage that Because like Terrell said, some people don't want to say, "Oh, I want this," or "I don't want it seem too needy too soon." No, this is what people are getting paid for. So I appreciate you all being able to share that story as well as include stories and advocacy about prep. For me, being on prep is one of the highlights of my life because I can share different aspects of it. But then, for me not being positive, I can share and refer people to great storytellers and impactors like you all. So I definitely think that you need to listen and you need to be able to connect. And like Marnina said, it's not connect like, oh hey, we just got you on the board, your cute face. No, 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 no. We want to hear your voice. We want to see your power. We want to see the change that you're invoking in the community. So for me, it's all about being able to connect and bridge those gaps.
Thank you, JC.
That's awesome. And if I can jump in real quick, first off, I think conversations like these need to happen more, and then the results of conversation like these have to be disseminated so that people can hear it and people can take in what we are saying and figure out ways that they can implement it into their service delivery, into their organizations, into their community engagement. I think all of that is important. And something that I would just tell the large agencies, find some youth champions, find people that are already doing this work, find people that are interested in this, because if we try to approach this from, well, this is how it was when I was, or this is what I think, then it's not going to be as impactful as if you just get somebody from the actual community that you want to engage with. Find some young folks that want to be a part of the movement, that have a passion for it, and give them the resources, the empowerment, the money to do what they need to do to create whatever programming they need to create. And then once you do that, then you support them in building their vision, and then you help tie in the things that are important, things that we know are evidence-based and all of that. But I feel like it has to start from community. So I just wanted to add that. I do apologize, I have to jump off to another meeting, but I hope to see you all again tonight at 8 o'clock for part 2. And thank you, Richard, thank you, Baller, thank you, PrideNet. On behalf of Time Network, we are so grateful for your partnership, your collaboration in this fight. Couldn't do it without y'all. I love y'all.
Thank you, Alfonso. And like Alfonso said, we hope to see you all later again, and we'll talk about that as we end the show. But there's a second part, so there's more conversation. So make sure y'all come back later on as well. But I'll pass the Cody or Marnina if you want to add to the discussion.
Oh, I'll jump right on in. I would say know that young folks that are living with HIV do not live single issue lives. There is so much to young people living with HIV. There are so many different layers of structural stigma and internal stigma that is impacting their health equity and outcomes. There are more than just their undetectable status, whether they are on treatment or not in treatment. There's so much to people, and people are multifaceted and multi-layered. And also, I want to echo what Alfonso was saying: give them the resources. So not only give them the resources, but make sure that it is sustainable by making sure that they have the correct mentorship to be able to maintain those resources that you're giving them. And those are the things that I really want folks of larger organizations and funders to really pay attention to. And just like Alfonso, I do have to jump off, but I am so excited about this conversation. I can't wait to jump on and see part 2 and jump in the comments because I will be there. And thank y'all so much for having me. Shout out to Time Network, Baller, and everybody else who's doing so much amazing work.
Thank you, Marnina, for your amazing work. Of course, the Queen. We are more than honored to have had you and for sharing those gems. And shout out to the work that you're doing at Southern AIDS Coalition. Shout out to SAC as well and their amazing grant making and their work around HIV in the South and stigma reduction. And Marnina, we'll see you later. And thank you so much.
All right. See y'all soon.
Cody, we'll pass the mic to you, bro.
Okay. So one of the things I would like to see is just like everyone else was on here saying, I think a lot of us got our start because someone believed in us and saw something in us. And I would like that opportunity to be expanded to other folks. I think we may have just been in the right place at the right time, but what are we doing to reach the folks who are in the wrong place most of the time? And I think once we start reframing what that looks like and seeing how we can incorporate other sectors of our communities into this work, then we'll be able to change what the outcome will be. And it's just kind of broadening what it looks like to be someone who is grant funded, kind of adding some technical supports in so that way once that person does get incorporated into the system, they can navigate it on their own without gatekeeping or the need for personal favors to happen. Just kind of really shoring up the next generation of advocates, whether they want to directly work in this field or do something adjacent where there's some cross promotion or some cross platforming happening. I just think we need to support folks where they are and, be that support for folks who want to get engaged with this type of work.
Big facts. You all, I mean, I know the things that I know y'all brilliance mind. I'm just glad that other people get to see the brilliance that you all bring to the table. But I mean, these are strategies, and this is why it's so important that we hosted something like this, which may seem like a small thing, but is major from our point of view because it's about spaces where we uplift young people.
Yeah. I think Rich is frozen, but Bristol Gang, we got this covered. So we definitely love and appreciate everybody being part of this conversation. We definitely appreciate all of our mentors and all of our colleagues who helped us get us here. Like I said, we aging out, but okay, we still in the game. And we're helping raise a new generation of advocates. And like Cody said, they don't always have to do the direct work, the photography, research, lawmaking. There's so many different avenues now that we may have not thought about 10 years ago. So as we navigate this space, and we definitely want everybody to come back for part 2 at 8 p.m. Pacific, Eastern Standard Time. I'm like, what time zone, man? No, we definitely want everybody to show up for part 2 tonight. It's going to be some great conversations, some great dialogue. We want you to type in your questions. Send questions in advance. Also want you to click our links, go to the Pride Study, as well as all of us LGBTQ. You find us, we will find you. Well, we can find each other because this is what it's all about: building that network, bridging those gaps, creating a sense of community, and navigating these spaces so we can continue to see the health improvements and health outcomes for all generations.
Hey, see. Again, I echo everything.
Rich echoes everything that I just said because Rich is amazing. He always agrees with me because that's what Bristol Gang does. The internet don't like you, but it's all right because we here.
The internet don't
we
like
here. So
This is about y'all, not me anyway. It's about listening to y'all and me kind of just moderating the conversation. But let me hear you before they cut off from me again. Thank you all for joining us. Again, we want to invite you back later on. 8 p.m. is going to be another dynamic panel. We're going to be doing some giveaways and stuff. So we're going to be giving away some gift cards and money later on. So make sure y'all join us then. Be sure to follow us on @Tiym Network. I know you're watching us on YouTube right now, but make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is @Tiym Network. Type that in YouTube and type @Tiym Network and subscribe. So please, we could really use your community support. We got some amazing things coming up with Tiym. But I want to thank all of our community partners and supporters. Shout out to Baller Life, shout out to PrideNet and All of Us Study. Shout out to Thrive SS, shout out to Positive Impact Health Centers, shout out to Southern AIDS Coalition and the NMAC, the National Minority AIDS Council. Thank you all again for joining us, and we hope that you really understand that this day, April 10th, every year, National Youth HIV/AIDS Awareness Day is a day for us to. It's a time for us to be aware. It's time for us to listen, and it's time for us to be informed by the challenges that youth and young adults face in regards to HIV. Until next time, see y'all later.
See you at 8 o'clock.